The information found in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hi, and welcome to the Women in Depth podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lourdes Viado. Join me as we explore the inner lives of women, their struggles, fears, hopes, and dreams. We'll go beneath the surface and take a deeper look at what is hidden, unknown, uncertain, and uncomfortable. Hi, and welcome back to the second episode of our special series on highly sensitive persons and complex trauma. My name is Lourdes Viado, and I am a psychotherapist in Las Vegas, Nevada, who works with anxious and overwhelmed, highly sensitive women.
And I'm Carmen Schmidt Benedetti. I am a psychotherapist in Sonoma County, California, and I specialize in working with highly sensitive women with complex trauma.
We're very excited about today's episode because with the holidays coming up, with the current climate in the world that all of us are affected by, we thought it would be helpful to offer some suggestions for highly sensitive persons who are trying to navigate the holidays in a way where they can stay centered and calm and grounded. And it's already challenging to do that. And at this time, it is even more difficult for a lot of different reasons. The tips that we're going to be talking about are, of course, specific to highly sensitive persons or HSPs, but actually everyone can benefit from ways to calm their nervous system. And these tips that we're going to go over today are also helpful for HSPs, not just now during the holidays, but in general. One of the things I wanted to talk about before we get into these suggestions is the concept of triggers, or the word trigger, because that is a word that's often used in the trauma realm. And you may hear things like, I saw a sign and it triggered me, or I was at this restaurant and there was a smell that triggered me. And the word triggered can actually be triggering, upsetting for people. So we wanted to offer some other ways to think of this word, and we will use other words interchangeably to help you see that there are other ways of describing this feeling of kind of being set off or emotionally charged by something that has happened. And so some of the words you may hear us using are reactive, distressed, activated, emotionally charged, out of your window of tolerance, feeling dysregulated, out of your degrees of freedom, emotional reactivity, your boiling point. And these are just different ways of describing what it feels like when something causes you to have a reaction. And you can have this reaction in many ways. It can be emotional, it can be physical. And there's a need to respond to this or prepare for this so that you can keep your nervous system calm and you can cope with whatever is happening to you effectively. And also not just with what's happening to you in that moment, but just life in general, the things you need to do, work, your relationships, and so on.
Well, so we've decided that we're going to break things up into categories because we thought that would be most helpful in understanding some of these tips that we're going to be providing. And one of the things that kept coming to mind as we were talking about how to set this up, we figured that the idea of boundaries was the biggest piece that was a good framework for talking about this, since a lot of these areas are around taking boundaries for yourself or having boundaries with others. I wanted started with talking about the boundary of time. So having boundaries around your time around the holidays, but can true in general. So when you're thinking about planning your time around the holidays, because I think we often get overwhelmed by all the things that there might be to do, events, or time we're going to be spending with friends or family. the way it can be especially important in planning your time is being very clear from the start, the family, about maybe how much time you're going to be spending with them. So a partner or maybe your immediate family, making sure you're getting on the same page about this so that when you set these clear boundaries, knows what the expectation is. So it might be communicating with a family member that, oh, we're staying for this many hours, or from this time to this time, or we're planning on leaving at this time. Or be something really specific that happens, like, well, has her third glass of wine, we need to leave. Things get uncomfortable at that point. And have like a cue word with your partner that which is like, if there's something that comes up, them know, hey, now is the time to leave when I do this, so that you can be, sometimes you can't pull them aside and you can let them know in that way. Boundary around time might be at time, if you need to think about something in order to decision. This can be especially true in relation to an HSP's depth of processing, just needing time to think about things. Sometimes HSPs are not very comfortable when they're put on the spot, and allow you to pause by saying, hey, let me think about that. Give you a little bit more to be able to think more clearly on how you feel about certain decisions, whether someone asks you thing or gathering or that kind of thing. And if you feel like you have the bandwidth to do that, especially during the holidays. Or tips around your would be making sure you have enough time for decompression, like giving yourself space to time, or for an event, you have plenty of time to kind of calm your system, and for transition. So from one thing to the next. This can be especially true for HSPs because some transitions can be difficult, even if it's a small transition, like from one activity to the next. Sometimes those shifts, you just need some space, for giving yourself plenty of time, I guess, for that transition so that you don't feel rushed. And then lastly, maybe being able to lighten your schedule a bit during this time with so much more going on around the days, and maybe a little bit more or from the other things that are happening during the holidays. Lourdes, do you have anything else you would want to add around that specific category?
No, I just want to emphasize what you said, though, about why we're approaching this from kind of like the umbrella of boundaries. And just overall, boundary setting is one of the best things that an HSP can learn to do for themselves. And, that you're going to hear a lot of this in our conversations moving forward. But again, anywhere where you can create these boundaries that will help you to feel like you are safe, that you're not overwhelmed, that you have control, that things are manageable. And once you start to create boundaries in your life, it'll get easier. And you will notice that there's a connection between how calm and centered you feel and how well you're setting your boundaries.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go ahead and move to our next category. And these have to do with your body and your physical space. This is your personal space, your home, your office. This is your body, and even how much you allow yourself to take on in terms of your mental capacity or emotional capacity, just your energy level. And these are also forms of boundary setting. One of the most important skills for HSPs is learning to take care of themselves. And I know that we hear the word or the phrase self-care said a lot. And sometimes when you hear a word a lot, it kind of loses its significance. But I have to stress that taking care of yourself is just like the boundaries, one of the most important things that, we HSPs can do. And so this can look like creating time for you to do what nourishes you, or to do what makes you feel good, or to do what is fun for you. This is just time for you, and making sure that you have this in your life, because especially at the holidays and in general, it can get really easy to be pulled into, well-intentioned activities, spending time with people you love. And so it's really important, again, to create these boundaries for yourself so that you can show up for yourself and for your loved ones and be fully present and in the best space that you can be. Taking care of your body, especially with what we are all dealing with collectively right now with the COVID pandemic. So important for you to make sure that you are protecting yourself, following guidelines as far as hand washing, social distancing, all of the things that we are hearing that help keep us safe, and especially in our interactions with loved ones, interactions at work, finding a way to be present and to be nurturing to others and engaged with others, but at the same time, making sure that we are honoring what we need to do to keep our bodies safe and healthy. In terms of situations or conversations that are overwhelming, overstimulating for HSPs, we have a finely tuned nervous system with mirror neurons which mirror what's happening around us. And so if you're around people who are in conflict or who are angry or who are anxious, you will start to feel this way too. And so this is why it's so important to really be mindful of who you are around and what their energy and emotions are, because you will also begin to mirror this. And this can be even things that are positive. Stimulation is stimulation. So excitement, joy, fun activities will have the same effect on your nervous system as anxiety, conflict, and stress. And, at the holidays, we have a lot more on our plate to begin with. And then we also have a lot more with what's happening collectively. So it's even more important than ever to really pay attention to how we feel around certain people and in certain situations. When you notice that you are becoming overwhelmed, and this is, I guess, Carmen, this is another episode we could do on how to tell when you're being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that was important.
But some of the signs for me is I start to get kind of short and irritable. I can tell that I am having a hard time really focusing. I'm distracted. I'm not present. Kind of feeling scattered. Headaches for me are a big sign that I'm getting overstimulated. So everyone's different. I know that if I didn't get enough sleep, I am going to definitely be much more easily overstimulated. So when you notice this, taking steps to retreat or withdraw from situations or conversations that are overstimulating, whether, again, these are positive, negative, or somewhere in between. For example, I can be in a Facebook group that I really love and enjoy and I'm inspired by, and I really enjoy the people in this group. But if I do too much of that, I'm going to get overstimulated. So ways to calm your nervous system down are turning off the screens, unplugging, going outside. I like to take my shoes and socks off and walk barefoot on the ground and feel the grass or the dirt under my feet. If you can't go outside, just go into a different part of that building or the different part of the home. One of my favorite things to help myself calm down is diaphragmatic or belly breathing. And this is something that, Carmen, we're going to have to do another episode on that one. But diaphragmatic breathing is breathing where you're breathing from your belly instead of your chest. And when we breathe from our bellies, we are taking deep breaths that actually really fill our lungs. And this, if you can do diaphragmatic breathing for 5 minutes, is what I heard is the shortest amount of time, you can actually activate your relaxation system in your body, which is through the vagus nerve. So again, diaphragmatic belly breathing is a lifesaver. I've done this in meetings. I've done this in the car. I've done this in the grocery store. It's a tool you can use anywhere you're at. And if you want to learn how to do that and you're not sure how, there are, you can Google it. There's Insight Timer has a lot of guided meditations on how to do this as well. Another way that you can start to calm yourself down and retreat from the overstimulation is to close your eyes. When I first learned about this, it just amazed me about how powerful it is. Even before like going into a session, just to take some breaths and to shut my eyes really helps my body calm down. Again, because I'm turning off the visual stimulation. Silence is another way to turn down the stimulation because now you're not hearing anything. Same thing with stillness because there's no movement. So think of your senses and what's a way that I can give my senses a break. Limiting alcohol, also caffeine. For many HSPs, our bodies are so sensitive that alcohol and caffeine and what maybe other people can consume and not have as intense an effect can be really strong for HSPs. So really being mindful of how much you're drinking, how much sugar you're taking in. I know for me, that is also a way that I can get really overstimulated, and it affects me where even my ability to think and to be present, like sugar is just something that really is difficult for my body to tolerate. And then when making plans, and this kind of ties into what Carmen was talking about before, maybe creating gatherings that are just smaller, just 2 or 3 people, because again, that's less sensory information that your body has to take in and process. Less is more is always a good thing for HSPs. If you're traveling, be very clear ahead of time where everyone is staying and for how long, whether you're hosting or whether you're a guest. Also, being mindful of what you're choosing for your travel, the way that you're traveling and where you're staying. One thing for me, I've noticed when traveling, I don't do well staying at people's homes. There's just too much information. There's novelty. And that's another thing for HSPs. Things that are new can be very stimulating. And so choosing maybe a hotel that you always stay at, because it's familiar, it, or choosing a place to visit that you already know what things you're going to want to do or what restaurants you're going to want to go to. That's another way to help with the overstimulation, is just really limiting the novelty and choosing accommodations, activities, ways of travel that help you to not feel overwhelmed. With the hugging and the handshakes, again, being clear about this beforehand so that you know how to handle it when something comes up, letting the people what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And again, if you can do this ahead of time, it is really helpful and you're not having to kind of deal with it in the moment. And the people, your loved ones and friends also aren't taken aback, or they also, perhaps it's a way to avoid some hurt feelings. I know for me, with relatives and family, just doing these socially distanced birthday parties, it can be a little bit awkward when, someone goes to hug you and you're not ready to do that or not able to do that. So being clear on what's okay with you and communicating this beforehand will save a lot of stress in the moment. Another way that you can honor your body and your physical space is making sure that you've created your own sacred space, your own place that you can be comfortable in, that's cozy for you, your little retreat, your way to kind of step back and feel rejuvenated and restored. And it can be a chair with a blanket and maybe your favorite book or a journal next to it. It can be in your bed with your weighted blanket and your eye mask. But just be sure that you have a way that you can create a sacred space for yourself. And this is a place that is just for this activity, and setting boundaries around this space as well, so that your loved ones know that, okay, this is where mom likes to go when she needs some quiet time. And when she's there, we all know we don't come in to the room, things like that. Is there anything else you can think of, Carmen?
Really love all the tips that you had, Lourdes. Those were great. Would just add in, piggybacking off what you were saying, is that, I really liked what you were saying about like closing your eyes and having silence. And especially right now when we're on screen so much, because that's our way to connect with people, or it might be how we're working. Just that closing your eyes can give you a break from some of that stimulation, can be very helpful. So along those same lines, physical boundaries can be especially important right now around your own health and safety, and that is okay, because everyone is going to have different needs around that, in terms of what they feel comfortable with to keep themselves and their family safe. And a little charged right now and have ideas around what they're comfortable with in terms of the social distancing or around with other people and who they're gathering with. And so just knowing that whatever is for you around you taking care and protecting you and your family is okay. Even if anyone else in your family or amongst your friends is different, and they're maybe pressuring you of being like, oh, us or come to this dinner or whatever it might be, not feel comfortable for you and your family, just knowing that is okay. And I think that can be something important to remember about boundaries, and with space and especially right now. So I guess I just wanted to add that extra in, because it can be important and for people to know, okay, whatever they might need.
Absolutely, Carmen. I'm so glad that you went back to that and emphasized those points about really whatever you need to feel okay, to feel safe, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's okay.
And that's a great segue into the next category, which I often call intellectual or communication boundaries. This is around, ideas and opinions and being respected, the way in which we communicate. So the most important things around that is being clear and direct with your needs. So HSP with trauma can often have a hard time recognizing their needs, their experiences, and say they might not be used to asking for their needs to be met, or that they're used to those needs being dismissed. So this can be especially challenging. That can be difficult about this is that HSPs tend to pick up on the subtleties of others. And so they often assume that others will pick up on what they're communicating. A non-HSP, and so then they can often be disappointed when someone doesn't understand because they think that they're being direct. They're not. So they need to be as direct and as clear as possible. And being direct you don't have to do that in a mean or rude way, which is often something that people get worried about, but you can do it in a gentle and caring way. This is when people use things like, not right now, or maybe some other time, or if possible, or maybe, or I'll make it, right? When there's these qualifiers in there, when they're stating something, a no, then it's a no, and that's okay. Just as I was mentioning before, like what you need, it's okay to communicate that. Qualifiers diminish the importance of that boundary or the clarity of that boundary, being direct as you can, of like, no, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'll try to make it, but really you're not, you're ongoing. Or concept is just remember, no is a complete sentence. you don't have to explain or over explain, which is true of a lot of HSPs. I know I do it a lot, where I want to over explain and give all these reasons and justify my reason for saying no. But really, that is all you need. You can just say, no, we can't make it. Be a lot of explanation around it. I'm communicating in writing, if that is easier, so that you can reduce maybe or as I was referencing before around needing time to think about something. It gives a bit more time when you're doing it through text or email, if the phone or in person is too difficult, because sometimes HSPs can articulate themselves better in a way, and it can allow them to be a little bit more clear and direct when it's not that face-to-face. Others might feel more comfortable the other in person, but basically just doing what works for you. But it's an option if you need to do it in writing. Kind of along those same lines with the communication and these intellectual boundaries around our ideas and opinions, especially right now, where things can get a bit heated, current circumstances in our right now. And so you can take space from conversations that get heated, like sort of connected to what you were talking about, Lourdes, earlier, just around your your environment and when you're overwhelmed to take breaks and things. And so knowing that you can say, hey, I need to walk away from this right now. Okay to do. So just because I'm noticing a lot of areas where there are overlaps is just a reminder that these specific categories, but a lot of them, the tips and things we're describing fall into the categories. There's overlaps in they might fall into, just for clarity purposes. Do you have anything else that you would want to add about any of those communication boundaries, Lourdes?
Just one thing that came to mind, Carmen, while you were sharing those is sometimes it's hard to remember that maybe this is a place where I need to set a boundary, or it's hard to remember that, oh, when I'm feeling this way, I'm getting overstimulated. So one thing that you can do, kind of like just a go to have, is if you don't know what to do, if you're feeling on the spot, if you can't think of how to respond, it's okay to say that you're going to need to take some time and you'll get back to them. And that's a way for you to create some space between this conversation, this decision, this situation, and then you can figure out what you want, again, so that you can actually be clear. Because sometimes, we have to think about what we want. And then once we think about that, we have to think about how to say it. And so it can be overwhelming just to kind of be in that moment, and you're kind of freeze up like, I know I should probably set a boundary, or I know I'm not feeling comfortable, but right now my mind is blanking, or I just can't think, or I can't find the words. And so I'm a fan of always just asking for time, and that I'll get back to them. And then I do that, via an email or a text, but then I'm in a better space to respond because I was able to step back, get myself settled and calm, figure out what I want, and then communicate it. So the next category or area that we're going to cover has to do with our emotional boundaries. And as Carmen mentioned before, there is overlap with all of these categories. And, when it comes to differences of opinions, disagreements, hurt feelings, it can be really overwhelming and uncomfortable when we come up against the emotions of others, their strong emotions, and our own. So again, this is an area where, put your attention on what works for you. Put your attention on what you need to feel or not feel in order for you to be okay, in order for you to not be overwhelmed. And it's really easy as HSPs to kind of on our default to notice and start to kind of nurture the emotions of others. And I think this is an area where it can be really easy to find ourselves feeling responsible for taking care of other people's emotions. And to a degree, of course, we care about how others are feeling, and we want to help them feel better or help them to feel comfortable. But this is one of those really fine lines where it's important for you to make sure that you're okay and that you're not sacrificing your well-being and your sense of calm to make sure other people are okay. And whatever you're feeling, it's legitimate, it's real, it's valid, and it's okay for you to feel what you're feeling. And so let's say that someone is very upset because maybe you're not able to come to an event or you're not able to engage with them in a certain way. Also realizing that they're allowed to have those feelings. They're allowed to feel a certain way because you can't make it, or you're saying, no, I can't do this. And letting them have that feeling, you can acknowledge that you can tell that they're disappointed or upset, and letting them know that you love them, you care for them, and maybe there's something else we can do at a different time. And again, be careful with that, like as Carmen was saying, that you're still clear. So you're not just buying time, but again, at the same time, honoring how you feel. So if you notice that you are starting to feel anxious or stressed because perhaps people are talking about plans that that you're not going to be able to participate in, recognizing that your emotions are messengers. They're letting you know, hey, this isn't going to work for you. And that sometimes setting the boundary might result in someone not feeling good about that. And I think the reason we struggle with boundaries is our boundaries are actually telling someone no. When we set a boundary, we're saying, I can't, this is my limit. When we set a boundary, we're saying, I can do this or I can't do this. And often when we tell someone no, there is a reaction. And so I tell my clients, and I have to remind myself of this too, that often when you're setting boundaries and people are getting upset, you're doing the right thing. If everyone's happy with you, you're probably not setting enough boundaries. I look at it this way. You can either feel uncomfortable with emotions because you're not setting a boundary, and that's going to affect your nervous system and your well-being, or you can set a boundary and sit with the discomfort that others are having certain feelings about that. But either way, you're going to be uncomfortable, and boundary setting doesn't necessarily feel good. It's not necessarily easy, although the more you do it, you will get better at it, and you will be better at tolerating the discomfort that comes sometimes when we tell someone no. So I guess one of the ways to tell is if you're setting boundaries where they're needed, you will probably experience a little bit of pushback or a lot. And I read this somewhere, and I think it's so true, that the people and situations who have difficulty with boundaries are going to be the ones you need to set the boundaries with the most. And it's probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So learning to recognize that, okay, I'm feeling this discomfort or this stress because I set a boundary, and that's okay. Carmen, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's sort of reiterating what you were saying, just this idea of not being responsible for other people's feelings or reactions. Because I think with that strong sense of empathy that H have, or maybe the way in which they grew up where they were kind of trying to navigate their circumstances so other people weren't getting upset, stay safe, that as a reminder to yourself, I'm not responsible for others' feelings or reactions, right? They're allowed to have whatever feelings that they have. They're entitled to that. And that's okay, but that you aren't responsible for having to manage or take care of that. So just that can be an important reminder to ourselves when trying to manage that. And similarly, also to what you were saying, I wish I knew who to quote around this, but of if the a phrase heard frequently of if people get upset about your boundaries, they were the ones that were benefited from you not having any in the first place.
That's a good one. I like that.
Used to you setting a boundary. And so they're like, whoa, like this isn't okay. I'm not getting what I want now. And so they are going to get upset because you're the dynamic and they don't like it. But that's not your responsibility to try to them upset. You may just understand why they're getting upset. Because people in our life who are respecting of our boundaries, if you said it, they will just be like, okay, I can understand that. The people in our life that we feel most comfortable doing that with will be respectful of those things. Sometimes we get a bit of pushback from others who a lot more out of you not having any boundaries. So that's just along those same lines of what you were saying, but I think are important reminders to ourselves that just kind of help to keep in mind.
So continuing with this category of emotional boundaries, it's really important for you to choose and create experiences that help you to feel good, that bring you joy, that help you to feel calm and grounded. And when we set boundaries, it also involves asserting yourself and choosing who and what helps you to feel good, helps you to feel good about yourself. When you choose what feels right for you, you're setting a boundary because you're saying no to what doesn't feel right for you. So that's kind of the other thing about boundaries. And we can talk about this in another episode, but the kind of the partner to boundaries is being assertive, which is, being clear about what you want and expressing it and expressing how you feel. And that is also setting a boundary. So when you say that we will be able to drop by for about an hour and we'd like to maybe meet on the porch because, we'll be able to be outside and social distance, right there, when you say that, you're saying what works for you. You're being assertive and you're setting a boundary because what you're saying is, we don't want to go inside. We don't want to get too close together. We want to make sure that we're being safe. And so there's a correlation between asserting yourself, which is being direct, asking for what you need or want, expressing how you feel, and setting boundaries. When you are direct and you ask for what you want and say how you feel, you are setting a boundary. So that's a way to kind of look at boundaries as not just a no, it's what I can do and what I will do. Because our bodies are so sensitive, it's really important to do the things that help your body to kind of decompress and release all the emotions that it's carrying. So exercise, getting enough sleep, getting outside. If there are hobbies or activities that help you to relax, whether it is reading, journaling, creating art, put those into your schedule, because that also helps you to stay grounded and calm during this time. When you have these moments of joy, really, really savor them. You want to really be in these experiences where you are feeling playful, where there's laughter, where you're in that moment and creating experiences that bring you joy, make you happy, that are fun, that make you laugh, that keep you present. These are things that will really help you to deal with, kind of the stress and the difficult emotions that may come up for you at this time. The other thing I wanted to touch on is holidays and gatherings can bring up tough family stuff, especially when you have been through trauma. And so another thing that I think would be important for us to remember during this time, that it's okay at this time to make sure that you have created places in your life where you can get that support and nourishment. So whether it's a therapist, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a good friend or family member who you can go to, because maybe some of the family dynamics or the reactivity, the emotional charge, the triggers, those types of things are becoming too much. Make sure you have those supports in place. It's good to have them in place anyway, but some of my clients, for example, when they know that they're dealing with family, will schedule an extra therapy session, or will schedule a quick phone call to touch base after they've done a family activity, just to kind of help them ground and calm their bodies. And it's okay to do this at this time because, again, emotions get very activated during times like this. And Carmen, is there anything else you want to add before you go to our next category?
No, I think that might be actually a great segue to the next category, which is around our energetic boundaries. And again, these might have some overlaps, but just where you were talking about the emotions and being able to stay grounded, I think is really key to managing our energy, especially kind of going back to what you were referencing before around the mirror neurons and how HSPs tend to take on a lot, a lot of energy, a lot of energy from others. And then I'm thinking, especially right now, just the collective energy of everyone and everything that's happening around us, just feeling the intensity of things happening around us, feeling the intensity of how other people are feeling. With those mirror neurons, we really pick up on that and we can feel it in our body, in our energy levels, in just taking it on. I don't know about you, Lourdes, but I definitely can feel it with everything that's been happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just kind of slowing things down for yourself. And this can be, again, generally what's happening right now. And this can happen around the holidays. There's just a lot more hustle and bustle with things getting amped up for time together, or just this pressure of doing things a certain way, or even this pressure of there's this idea that the holidays are so joyful and wonderful, and they aren't for everyone. Referencing what you were talking about, Lourdes, where it can be really intense, especially for those with trauma who grew up in environments where it didn't feel that comfortable, or it was very negative for them. And people might be around those people that they grew up with and needing to manage that and feeling everything from that. So being able to take things a little bit slower for yourself, whether that's with your schedule, whether that's just taking more alone time, doing things more slowly in general, and being mindful, really incorporating a lot of mindfulness can be really centering and grounding, being aware of what you're doing and staying present in the moment rather than getting caught up in all the things that you have to do, staying focused on what you're doing in the here and now. So along with that, maybe taking it one thing at a time, step by step. This is something I often encourage my clients to do because they're 10 steps ahead most of the time. And I'm like, whoa, slow down. You're into like next year, next week, whatever it is, like what can you do right now, especially with everything that's going on when there's certain things that feel out of our control. What do you have control over? Take it one thing at a time. What can you do just in this moment? Oh, you can take some deep breaths. Let's focus on your breathing. Or you can cook a nice meal for yourself. Or you can do some yoga, whatever that might be, just one thing at a time. Oh, I can focus on this one task for work instead of all of the things. Simplifying. I'm thinking also with things like your meals, make them really basic and simple so that it's easier to manage, especially around the holidays when a lot of times meals and things get elaborate. You can make it, have some basics that are comforting and nourishing to you and they feel good. And making sure you're taking time to ground. And if it's within your practice, doing some like energy clearing, which that might resonate for some people if they're listening, and others maybe not. Maybe that's something we can talk about another time about kind of what that means. But just like when we take on all of this from others, making sure we're not holding all of that, all other people's emotions or their energy, and spending some time kind of letting that go and recognizing what is yours and what is theirs. And that can be especially important to be boundaried around and being able to kind of regulate your own emotions.
This just came to mind when you were talking. I just want to remind, everyone who's listening that it's also important to be very gentle with yourself and compassionate about your capacity to deal with things. Because one of the things HSPs struggle with, and I hear it from clients, I've said it to myself, I still say it to myself, is, gosh, why can't I do this? Or, this frustration that things that other people can do can be overwhelming for me. And then I start to feel like, why is this too much for me? So I think it's important to remind yourself that you have this beautiful, unique trait of high sensitivity, and it has gifts. And there are other things that we need to kind of keep in mind that we might find difficult. And it's okay that you can't tolerate as much, that you can't spend as much time, or you can't plan as many activities. One of the things I laugh about is a few years ago, one of my sisters had planned like this whole weekend of things to do. We're going to do this in the morning, then we'll do this at 3, then we'll do this at 6. And the next morning, I had to say, I can't do all that. Then, came the feelings of, wow, I'm not going to be participating in all these activities. And what if she's mad at me? And why don't I just suck it up and show up for everything? But I knew that was just going to be too much for me. And so learning to recognize, what you can do and celebrating that and loving yourself and being gentle with yourself when you're not able to as well.
Yes.
The next area that we're going to be focusing on is the category of finances, the material aspect of life. And, when we're talking about this, we're talking about, of course, money, gifts, things, and money, gifts, and things. So that's kind of like a theme for the holidays, And again, less is more. Simplify. This is going to be a lot easier on your nervous system. This is going to help you to not feel overwhelmed or anxious. And so being intentional about how many gifts are we buying? Who are we buying gifts for? How much are we spending? Decorations. Deciding that we're going to have a tree and we're going to do this. We don't need to window clings in all the windows and lights and animated figures in the yard. And again, being clear to your partner, to your family about what you can do. And again, keeping that as simple as possible. Giving gifts that can be consumed, so cookies, bread, pies, gifts that can be experienced. So tickets to a museum, tickets to a zoo. They have all kinds of really amazing subscription boxes that you can get for people, whether they love tea or they love to paint, and you can just get them one box. It doesn't have to be a whole subscription. Digital gifts, subscriptions to magazines or newspapers, just experiences that will not take up space, but will create memories. And again, discussing this, having this conversation with family and friends ahead of time so that people are clear, they know what to expect, and this can help lessen, hurt feelings or misunderstandings down the road. And again, doing this is especially going to be meaningful with how many people right now are struggling in different ways because of this global pandemic that we are all being affected by. And I think that this is actually something that many will appreciate that you bring up and are clear on. Carmen, is there anything that you can think of to add to that?
I think you covered most of it. I just emphasizing that, right now, circumstances might be different for a lot of people financially. And I think the theme that we keep reiterating is like listening to yourself and your needs and setting whatever boundaries that you need around that. It's okay if you can't do what you've done in the past. And that might be hard, especially for some folks who gift giving is especially important to them. Like it's one way they might communicate their care and love for people, but knowing that there are other ways that you can do that. And I think you provided some really good examples of alternative ways that you can do that. Sometimes just some type of spending time together and connecting, whatever that might look like right now, can be a gift, right? Just being able to find some time, those experiences, or giving that as for families to spend time together. Those are some great alternatives to spending money on things. Well, thank you all for listening, and hopefully you were able to get something out of this that was helpful for the holidays and maybe even in general in terms of setting boundaries for yourself and with others. If you're interested in having some of the tips from these episodes, you can check out the show notes, and we'll have the handout there for you with just kind of a list of some of these tips that we mentioned. And also, if you are needing some extra support during this time, you're welcome to reach out to me or Lourdes. We're offering online therapy in Nevada and California if you're needing some additional support. And if we are not available, we can provide you some referrals and resources that might be able to be helpful during this time.
And I just want to add also that if you are listening and you do need some support and you're not in Nevada or California, I encourage you to go to Dr. Elaine Aaron's website. It's hsperson.com, and she has a list of therapists who are all knowledgeable of the trait and experienced in the trait and who work with highly sensitive individuals. And you may be able to find a therapist who works with highly sensitive persons in your own state. And of course, if you're still not able to find anyone, please reach out to me or Carmen, and we will do what we can to help find a therapist for you. Thanks again so much for listening, and we hope that your holiday season is calming and joyful, and you're able to move through it in a way that feels right and good for you. Carmen and I will be back after the new year with a lineup of content and information and conversations that we feel will be really helpful to you as you navigate this journey of complex trauma as a highly sensitive person. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Women in Depth podcast. I hope it brings you a deeper understanding of yourself and others, and that you found some insights that illuminated and inspired. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting Women in Depth with a one-time or recurring donation. Any amount is appreciated and helps us continue to provide free, quality content for the world. If donating resonates with you, you can find the donation link on today's show notes. You can also follow Women in Depth on Facebook and YouTube. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes. Again, thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.